Hello for the 28th Sunday in Ordinary Time, using the first reading, 2 Kings 5, verses 14 to 17, and the Gospel Luke 17, 11 to 47. I deal with people dealing with leprosy. One is the Old Testament, Naaman and Elisha the prophet. Two is St. Francis Assisi. And then back to the gospel, Jesus and the 10 lepers. Well, the first, Naaman, goes to the prophet and wants to be cured of his leprosy. And the prophet says, go jump in the Jordan River and 7 times you'll be cured. And boom, he does, and he's cured. Totally surprised. He thought it was going to be very, very complicated. And he comes back to the prophet and says, your God is the only true God. Let me give you this or that. And the prophet doesn't want anything. And he said, well, give me 2 loads of earth, mule loads of earth. And when I go back to my country, Syria and Damascus, I'll set up an altar there for you, for your one true God who cured me of my leprosy. 2, St. Francis. Now, this Naaman was 500 BC. Francis, 13th century. And St. Francis, there's a little story written about St. Francis by 3 of his brothers, followers, and it's called To Kiss a Leper. I like to read it because the leprosy sort of transformed Francis. And it goes like this. One day while Francis was praying fervently to God, he received an answer. It said, "O Francis, if you want to know my will, you must hate and despise all that which hitherto your body has loved and desired to possess. Once you begin to do this, all that formerly seemed sweet and pleasant to you will become bitter and unbearable, and instead, the things that formerly made you shudder will bring you great sweetness and contentment." Francis was divinely comforted and greatly encouraged by these words. Then one day, as he was riding near Assisi, he met a leper. He had always felt an overpowering horror of these sufferers, but making a great effort, he conquered his aversion, dismounted, and in giving the leper a coin, he kissed his hand. The leper then gave him the kiss of peace. After which Francis remounted his horse and rode on his way. From that day onward, he mortified himself increasingly until God, through God's grace, he won a complete victory. Some days later, he took a large sum of money to the leper hospital, and gathering all the inmates together, he gave them alms, kissing each of their hands. Sounds like our Pope. Formerly, he could neither touch or even look at the lepers. But when he left them on that day, what had been so repugnant to him had really and truly been turned into something pleasant. Finally, indeed, his previous aversion to lepers had been so strong that besides being incapable of looking at them, he would not even approach the place where they lived. And if by chance he happened to pass anywhere near their dwelling, or see one of the lepers, even though he was moved to give them an alms through some intermediate person, he would nevertheless turn his face away and hold his nose. But strengthened by God's grace, he was enabled to obey the command and to love what he had hated and to abhor what he had hitherto wrongfully loved. In consequence of this, he became such a friend to the lepers that he has himself declared in his testament, he lived with them and served them with loving eagerness. 3 companions, it's sort of a legend of St. Francis dealing with a leper and lepers. Well, and finally, Jesus Christ comes upon 10 lepers, foreigners, and not Hebrews. And they ask, for help. They ask for cure. And boom, he says, well, go show yourselves to the priests and you'll be okay. And by golly, they didn't jump into the Jordan River like Naaman, but they went and headed for the priest. But on their way to show themselves to the priest, all 10 were cured. And lo and behold, one decides to go back to Jesus and thank him. Now, this gospel is the gospel today, and to a certain extent, I get upset because we have this gospel today, and then 4 or 5 weeks later, on Thanksgiving, 9 out of 10 times we use this gospel for Thanksgiving at the end of November. And then I thought, well, most of the Roman Catholics don't go to church on Thanksgiving, so it's a great gospel for them, and maybe not me, but really it's a great gospel. And my thinking is this: Jesus Christ cured 10 out of 10. Jesus Christ cured all. And one comes back and gives thanks. Jesus Christ suffered and died and rose again for all men and women in the history of the world, past, present, and future. How many really know this? And how many really know this and are grateful and thankful and come back? 2 ideas. Thanksgiving's coming up. Why don't you zero in on giving more thanks, deeper thanks? But probably also the percentage I think is interesting. We are redeemed. We have been cured. We have been saved, redeemed. And how often and what percentage of all people come back to Jesus and says thanks? Or even what percentage of the people even know that in and through Jesus Christ they have been saved? It's not just this little teeny people, even it's not 10% of the people who have been saved, but 100% of the people through Jesus Christ becoming a man, becoming incarnate, taking on flesh, living like us, suffering, dying, rise again, and going back to the Father. In that becoming a man, he has taken everyone. 10 out of 10 lepers. 100% out of 100%. And saved us. Do we really know it? Do we really appreciate it? And do we really come back often and say thanks? Praise the Lord.